Welcome to the Carbonite Jedi, where the Force will be with you always. Today, I am talking with Roger Christian, who was the set director on Star Wars and the art director on Alien, plus a plethora of other movies, commercials, and music videos. So today we're going to talk with Mr. Christian. Hello, Mr. Christian. How are you doing?
Hi, good evening to everybody. Good to be here.
This is so amazing. I mean, because I saw Star Wars when I was 6, and
Right.
it blew my mind. I mean, I'd seen Star Trek and stuff like that, but there was nothing around like Star Wars. And I'm just curious how I heard that you were shoveling salt at the time. Was that like a salt factory?
Yeah, I was working on a film called Lucky Lady that was in Guaymas in Mexico. It was about rum running in the 30s. And we were converting old Mexican buildings into sets. And the one I was doing when I was there was converting a salt factory, which was like a port where there was a action scene took place. And George and Willard Hike, who wrote American Graffiti, wrote Lucky Lady, and they became big friends with John Barry and myself and saw what we were doing. And when Fox had agreed to give George $4 million, and that's all to make Star Wars with, and the only stages were available in England, and we were half the price of America, because the budget Gary Kurtz had done was $8 million.
Oh.
They said, you better fly down and meet John and Roger, and because they're doing what you're describing as a spaghetti Western. And George arrived, and just George in his usual same plaid shirt, jeans and sneakers, and Gary in a cowboy hat. And they came across, and then George, being George, picked up a shovel and started doing salt with me.
Oh my gosh.
And we chatted about, he told me then he wanted to make the spaghetti Western in space. And I kind of admitted that I had not connected to any science fiction movies before because I found them all futuristic and unreal. And I imagined it like an old car in a garage that you kept repairing and it was dripping oil. Well, little did I know at the time, I was exactly describing the Millennium Falcon, and only realized it when we got into London, like months later.
Oh, wow.
So John, Barry, and I were and the DP, we were the first 3 people hired to make Star Wars.
That's funny because I did read that in your biography, or on Wikipedia. It said you claim to be one of the first 3 people hired on Star Wars. So
yeah, it's in the making of Star Wars. John Rinsler put it in. John Barry was number 1, and the DP on Lucky Lady, who couldn't do it, Jeffrey Unsworth, was number 2, and I was number 3.
Oh, okay. that's something to be proud about.
Yeah.
So I saw that you have a book. I'm gonna pop it up on the screen. It's called The Cinema Alchemist: Designing Star Wars and Alien, and it's your memoirs and how you built the lightsaber, won an Oscar. And it's available on Amazon, and I put the link in my on YouTube for it. But that tells everything that happened from Star Wars to Alien. Does it go into any of your other movies, or?
It does. It's Star Wars, Alien, a little bit of Life of Brian.
Okay,
that's a separate story, really, on its own. And a few other tidbits, and then the whole making of Black Angel, the short film that George commissioned, that was my start as a director, because John Rinsler, who was the head of literature at Lucasfilm, he edited it for me, and he said, this is a masterclass on filmmaking on Black Angel. We have to keep that. The reason I did the book was because there's nothing in the archives, none of the interviews, they were all lost of mine.
Oh, no.
And the making of Star Wars, we're not mentioned. And if you look at any of the making of official documentaries on Star Wars, our names aren't even mentioned. No one knew what we were doing. George was too busy making his movie, and we were right there 4 months before the film was greenlit, trying to work out how on earth to make this for the tiny bit of money we had and the lack of time that we had, and how everything that was done right through the movie, David West Reynolds, who became the head of literature, cornered me. I was directing second unit on The Phantom Menace with George, and I was at their annual picnic at the ranch in July, which is right from the very first, before the ground was broken. We always had a picnic. And this young man came rushing up to me and said, "You're Roger Christian. You need to answer this question. I've been looking through the archives. I don't know how this was done, and when I wrote the book and everything." So he forced me to write it. He said, "It's a legacy. You have to do it," because John died very young, John Barry. So there isn't anyone else. So I took a year off and got it made somehow.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's on my list. I'm going to order it today and read it, and I'll email you and let you know how I like it.
Yeah, I've had about 100% reviews from it, and one professor changed his entire film curriculum at a film college in America, saying it's like a masterclass. So, and it's not written out of ego; it's written pure fact of what we did and how we did it. And the last line in my book is, "Don't let anyone tell you you can't. You can."
That's right. That's exactly right.
It's a mentoring as well for any student, whatever age of film or anything in life. It doesn't matter.
That's right. On a side note, real quick, I have two 6-year-old or two 7-year-old now twins, daughters, and they wanted to know, did you have anything to do with the hyperspace look of the movie?
Well, what George came to London with was 6 paintings by Ralph McQuarrie, who's a true genius.
Oh, I had some of his paintings.
And I've made a documentary now from the book and my experiences called Galaxy Built on Hope. I've just divided it into 6 episodes. So they're trying to sell that and find a home for it now. And part of my mission there was to give Ralph McQuarrie back his place in the history of Star Wars, because this man is a genius. So everything that we did, I went to his paintings and found there it was. And when George came to London, of course, we had no money and we had no time. And so we made an R2D2. I'm going roundabout way to answer this question.
Oh, okay.
It'll probably answer some of your other questions. But
sure.
Because R2D2 was only 4 foot high and there was no CGI in those days, there was very primitive radio control. If we couldn't make him walk, there wasn't a movie. So we got stuck into that. Sorry. And basically that I stuck bits of old aircraft nozzles, light nozzles and things in him, and I carved bits myself with a penknife, and we got it made. I made the weapons out of old World War II guns because I didn't have time to make anything, and I love these old guns. They're just beautiful.
They're fantastic.
Everything that I did like that went to, I can't do the Millennium Falcon interiors, but if I buy scrap aeroplane, then I can fill the sets with it. And this was an idea I had. I didn't know if it would work, but I knew I could buy it cheaply. Everything like that created a look that the hyperspace kind of followed that look. So the jump itself was rotoscoped by the ILM boys in San Francisco.
Oh, okay. Excellent. That's funny. So I've noticed, ever since I've seen Star Wars and you have the tunnel hallways inside the Millennium Falcon, it seems so many people have copied that. And it's just an attestament to some kind of masterpiece that you created with the Millennium Falcon. I mean, it even stands today. I mean, they still use it today in the movies. So,
yeah, that was the first set we ever built, was the cockpit. and he put on a art director who did 2001, Harry Lang, genius. But he was doing it like 2001, and I kept going on the set and saying, Harry, I'm going to destroy this and mess it up. It says in the script it's a pile of junk. And so I kept coming in, and he kept warily looking at me, and then he finally said, okay, you go to work. And I bought old fighter pilot seats and put them in, and I started dressing stuff in to make it look like the Millennium Falcon. And I was doing the same with the big hold set at the same time, where I was buying loaders of scrap. I can't tell you how it eats this stuff. And I could buy half an airplane for £50. No one wanted it then.
Oh my goodness.
So I was just having low loaders and jet engines, Rolls-Royce engines coming in. I mean, everything. And I taught my prop boys who were used to furniture and curtains to get tools and break it down, and how we structure it in the sets. And that first set became like the vision of what it was going to be. And I called George down and said, you better come and have a look, because I think we dressed it. And that was when George smiled, and there it was. There was this ship. The hold itself was going on at the same time, and it would look terrible. I was praying people wouldn't come and look at it, because the junk only works once you've got it really layered and the corridors really layered in. I would putting in plastic drain piping, wires. We found a telephone exchange that was being pulled down in England, in London. And my buyer bought the whole telephone exchange. All the wires were going in and things like that. And finally, it emerged. And the corridors, once we got it crusted and we painted it down and oiled it down and everything. And then I could see people coming on the set just like their mouths opened. They couldn't believe that this was actually a real ship somehow. And I think, that obviously that was the influence. That's why Ridley begged me to come on Alien and create the entire Nostromo interiors, which I had to do. I took my prop boys I trained over. And that became the standard look. And it's funny because we created an industry, they told me later, when I was directing Second Unit on Phantom Menace. Rick McCallum said, what's happened now? You can only rent the stuff in England. It's so expensive. It was cheaper for him to buy scrap airplanes in the graveyards in Texas and fly it to Tunisia and London for them to build the sets out of. So it's a standard now. It's, even Avatar, I see very similar. He still uses, junk and formed junk and made junk. If you have the budget and the time, you can create the stuff. But I think, I was inspired by submarines, B-52 bombers. And when you look at the first astronauts going up in these little tiny crammed kind of pods, they flew around in. And it was a part of Star Wars getting accepted by an audience, because they didn't have to kind of look and go, well, that's weird. Oh, what's that funny shape? Why are they in that weird space? You just accepted they were in a real environment. And I think that was my dream. That was my purpose always. And I felt that's how I would make science fiction if I could do it. And it just happened to coincide with George, who's, spaghetti Western in space vision was exactly the same. We just didn't have to talk. We didn't have to discuss it. I just knew inherently what to do.
Well, my 6-year-old inner child thanks you so much.
I get a lot. I get a lot of that. I know. I get so many people, and I've got a 10-year-old now who just is always building bits of Lego and lightsabers and all sorts of stuff. So the same way.
That is fantastic. So I did a short yesterday on my channel, and it talks about the escape pod that C-3PO and R2-D2 were jettisoned out of. Did you make that?
Yeah, we made that in England. The John Barry actually designed, if you look at the cantina set, the exterior, they're sitting there there's a very classic NASA round space pod.
Mm-hmm.
He designed it like that to start with, and it just looked too science fiction. I grabbed it because I didn't have enough vehicles. My goal was to make the exterior of the cantina look like a hitching post, but in space on Tatooine.
Yeah.
I grabbed everything I could get, and that went in there in front of it as if it was parked there. But then the second one that was designed actually came from the ILM boys. It came from Joe Johnston, who designed it more to be like a pod that matched what we were doing in London.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a symbiosis of different people working on either side of the Atlantic without any communication. There wasn't any way then. We had a pouch going backwards and forwards every week.
That's fantastic. I read that the pod that R2D2 and C3PO came out of was actually made out of a paint can.
No, I don't think so. Oh, probably the miniature one was.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So the one they come out of, that was actually built, and we put it in the desert, in the sand dunes in Tunisia, and it had a hinged opening, and they actually could, if they could have done it, would have come out of it. But George cut that out because it was impossible. So you see it take off, you don't see it land. I actually made it land in Galaxy Built on Hope. I animated it and crashed it and opened the door, and C3PO's hand comes out. Because to me, that was a missing moment.
Yeah.
But it's open in the background in the dunes. So that was a full-size pod.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense. Okay. That the small one they shot going down to the planet was the bucket, but the one on the planet was a full-size one.
Yeah, that was a full-size.
So you worked with George Lucas and Ridley Scott on two different movies. One was more of a alien horror movie,
right?
And one was, Star Wars. So what differences were there between working with Mr. Lucas and Mr. Scott?
Very different. They're very different filmmakers, and George at the time on Star Wars was very shy, and he had a vision and just got his head down and was trying to make it. The difference there, and George actually says it not so long ago, there's a very good YouTube interview with Christopher Nolan talking about movie making, and on that he says, Christopher, there were only 5 people stood by my side on Star Wars, and that was the art department. And that was true. The rest thought it was a pile of rubbish. It was just a job they got on with. They were denigrating George all the time. They thought it was never see the light of day. I'd got to know George and John Barry, and we were very close. In 4 months, there were just the 4 of us and George and Gary working together. And by the time, I'll tell you that how bad it was. I had made the Sterling blaster. I'd made 3POs. I'd made, Chewbacca's bowcaster. I'd made Han Solo's pistol, Leia's pistol. I made all the guns, sticking it myself with super glue and bits of T-strip and old sights. I did it all in the gun hire place. They asked me to lay everything out the day that Fox financed the film, and we went into the studio and they laid it out. The first assistant and the main prop on the floor and everybody, the Sterling literally threw it at me and said, "This is crap. Don't you realize we're making a science fiction movie for a big American director?" And went off to get me fired. That little story tells you how it was on that shoot. The DP was awful to George the whole way through, extremely rude to him. And in the end, Gary was the intermediary. They never spoke. For George, it was such a tough movie. It put him in hospital.
I heard that.
Yeah, that was stress. But he stuck to his guns, and he had the actors with him. They were always on side. I think Alec Guinness being there was such a legendary actor that his professionalism and support really helped. Ridley I knew because he was the king of commercials.
Really? I didn't know that.
Multi-millionaire. By the time he got Alien, he was the #1 commercial director in the world. And I'd done commercials for him, and Tony was godfather to my son, and I knew them all. And Ridley had made The Duelist, and then this huge film that he was given. There were 8 or 9 producers on set, all controlling it. It was difficult from that, but Ridley had a vision that was cinematic. I always say Ridley's head is a camera. He's extraordinary. And Ridley directed Alien with a huge Panaflex camera on his shoulder. Most of that film was handheld. So the similarity is they both had a vision and they both stuck to it and wouldn't give in, despite immense pressure from everybody. But Ridley was already hugely successful.
Yeah.
And he made some of his commercials are outstanding. I mean, visually stunning. And I knew when I read the script with Ridley there, and I was seeing Giger's paintings, there were 6 original paintings around the office and everything. I knew this was going to be something special.
Yeah, it was a very, but 6-year-old me didn't think it was. That was scary.
I know. I'm about to show my 10-year-old. I thought now he can probably cope with it. So, but that's the similarity. Both those films still work, and they're still in your subconscious. They're still, they're part of cinema history. Even now, these massive superhero movies, they're great. You watch them, but then you just wait for the next one.
Yeah. These
2 embedded in your memory forever, the whole world. I mean, that's why they connected to the world.
Very much so. Yeah, I had a live watch party on my channel, and I think either 2, we can get a max of 9 people, and I think 2 or 3 people had not seen Star Wars. So we had a live watch of Star Wars. It was very interesting seeing what they thought of it, after we got done watching it. And a lot of them were, they were like, oh, this is a lot better than I thought it would be. People really downplay it or down talk it. And they said it still stands up to the time. And I thought it was fantastic that they were saying that.
Yeah, it's, partly why I did the book as a legacy, because everybody now, it's the 4th generation. They see huge Hollywood blockbusters. This thing, first one, came to light under impossible circumstances. With even Fox didn't believe in it. Only Alan Ladd Jr. Nobody believed in this film, and we got it made somehow.
On a string and a prayer, right?
Yeah, on sealing wax. Yeah,
that's too good.
And same Alien. It was very low budget.
But it was the acting and the hard work y'all put into it.
Yeah,
I see so many lower budget movies that can't. They're just horrible. I mean,
yes, I know.
But
it's a certain kind of, I don't know. It's an inherited somehow vision that we have. Mine coincided with Ridley and George.
Yeah, this is great. One of my friends, Scott, has a question. He said, how did you decide on using so much neon green on Alien?
Ridley, when I first went there, he said, look, because he loved the Millennium Falcon, he said, but what I want is a space truck and make it really used and old. So I then got army camouflage colors, and we made all the corridors in that, made everything kind of that, and then red where we had to and white where we had to. But the basic colors are green, like an army truck. That came from Ridley's first kind of statement to me. That can we make it like that?
Nice. So he had a color scheme for his his movie. Okay.
And George's was a dusty Western, and then contrasted with the evil Death Star, which is more 2001 kind of mechanical, and the Tatooine, which we did with using Tunisia, which was very low budget at the time, and it had that ancient look that we were able, with the budget, to convert Tunisia into a planet.
Yeah, I heard you almost started a war out there.
Well, we were where we were building in the desert. We were very close to the Algerian border, and Algerians a closed-off country.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, army trucks all arrived, and we were building the Sandcrawler,
mm-hmm.
which was the biggest set we built. It was massive. They thought we were building a weapon, and the reason they were so worried is because the oil reserves go under the border. They're on both sides. So they thought we were building a weapon and we were going to go and attack and steal all the oil.
Oh, no.
and then, Robert Watts, who's the line producer, is fluent French. So he was explaining to them, and then the word Star Wars comes up. Oh, wars. But they didn't understand what a film was or what a film set. They no one had been there before doing this. So they finally were convinced and left.
Oh, wow. Got a little hairy there for a while.
Yeah, you never know.
Oh my God. Yeah. You're out in the middle of nowhere like that, and
the border was just a ditch. I went to the border with some fence, like a rough fence, everything. It was open.
Oh, wow. Going back to what you said about George Lucas having so much pressure, I had a question, and it said a lot of people thought Star Wars was going to flop when it was being made.
Everybody.
Yeah. Even James Earl Jones at first didn't want his name to be in the credits because he didn't want his name associated with it. So you're saying, like, basically the art department was the only one that stuck by George this whole time, and maybe the actors.
Yeah, even Les Dilly, who's the art director I work with a lot, he said, we read this script, thought this is a pile of crap. I mean, we didn't understand a word of it. I'm already was embedded in myth and legend and studied it, and I hero worshipped King Arthur, and I knew that when you look at King Arthur, it's Excalibur, and I knew this lightsaber would become the icon of Star Wars if I could get it right. And that story I told you about the gun at the beginning there, they threw it at me. This was how it was throughout the entire shoot. The only saving grace was the British crews. It was a job, and they work hard. Doesn't matter what it is. They just do the job and got on with it. Otherwise, we would have been in trouble. I mean, at one point, the British editor didn't understand at all and put together footage that shocked everybody. And the complaints that were going through the head of Fox in London to Alan Ladd were, George doesn't know what he's doing, the cut doesn't work, the DP was saying he doesn't know what he's doing, this young kid. And even the special effects guy went against George and was backing him. Alan Ladd flew over ostensibly to decide whether to fire George off his own movie. This meeting took place. And Alan Ladd stuck by George when George told him, I haven't seen any footage yet. This is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm planning. And I remember Gary Kurtz telling me that Alan Ladd was at Pinewood, they viewing rushes on the big screen there, and he said, I'm going to walk round the stage at the outside at Pinewood. It's a big stage. And he said, when I come back, I'll tell you whether we just can the movie or we go on. So, yeah, that pressure on George as a director is horrible. And when we met George, Gary Kurtz was very clear. His budget was $8 million. They analyzed, because science fiction was in the toilet, don't forget, there was no box office for it. Nobody wanted to do it. So the Fox accounting and the board analyzed it would make $12 million. So in those days, they divided that in three. and a third would go to the filmmaker. And if you could make your film for the third, which was $4 million, they said they would green light Star Wars.
Hmm.
And eventually, Gary kept chipping away and everything, and he got it up to 6. And then by chance, the dollar exchange rate went to double. And Robert Watts, the English line producer, persuaded the accountants at Fox to dump all the money into England rather than in stages. And he said that got about $2 million extra on the exchange rate. So the budget kind of went up. And somehow we got it made.
That's awesome. Yeah, I heard that when they sent the film to Fox and George hadn't seen it, you said that when George came back, his wife is actually the one that helped him edit everything.
Yeah, she was a brilliant editor, Marsha. I mean, she edited Taxi Driver films for Scorsese and things.
Oh,
and,
wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. She's a highly renowned editor. So she was on the set a lot, kind of, but I think not quite being in tune with this sci-fi space opera for children that he was doing. But when they went back and they looked at what John Jimson had done in London, the decision was, we got to do this ourselves. And so she edited a lot of it with George. And it's interesting, that famous screening in San Francisco, well, in up at Marin County, when he showed it to Brian De Palma, Steven Spielberg, John Milius, a few others. They all condemned it, and Brian De Palma said, cut all this thing about the Force, you don't want that. And Gary Kurtz and Marsha had been very keen on that. They said, this is making it very deep, you've got to keep this in. And George actually went and cut it out on his own. And Marsha and her editor put it all back one night without telling George. And so it got left in. It was too late to take it back out again. The only person who said to George, this film is genius and you've got something in your hands, was Steven Spielberg. And he encouraged George to go on. And he said, I can imagine with the special effects, you're going to do everything. You've got something in your hands here.
That's awesome. I know he and Steven Spielberg are really close friends.
Very close.
To this day.
Yeah, they stuck by each other, and that is a huge support system when you're out on a limb like they are, trying to make different films.
And so when the movie was released and it starts off with the crawl, the director, what was it? The Directors Guild, they got all bent out of shape and kicked George out of their guild, or he left because he did that, or what happened with that?
No, the that was something different. There was George. There's an interview, if you can ever find it on YouTube, with George after Space THX, when Universal said, you're finished, you're going to pay us back $500,000 we spent on this, all of that. And there's a very interesting talk with an intellectual critic in the hills above Hollywood with George, who's saying, I've decided with Coppola that all you need to make a film is a camera and a sound equipment. We can do that in San Francisco. No one had ever done that, so we're going to leave. And he decided then that he would have nothing to do with Hollywood. It's another story that with American Graffiti, there was so lack of belief. Francis Ford Coppola went into the head of Universal and wrote a check for $1 million and said, if the kid screws up, cash it. So
That's some
You,
faith
you,
right there.
so you can understand why George actually himself said, I want nothing more to do with Hollywood, with nothing. And they went and retreated to San Francisco, and he never has had. He's not an American Guild, nothing. He wanted to own his own films and do the films that he wanted. And he's been so successful at that. He's a kind of master mentor for the world, really, on how to do it.
That's true. That is true. Did you get to go to the ranch a lot? And
Yes.
is it pretty nice?
No, it's stunning. It's beautiful. And here's something else, George created the New England house, the barns. When you go to the Sound, which is the best sound studios in the world, you're walking up a gravel path under vines overhead and everything. It's like being in New England. George, to build that, actually designed everything down to the hinges, everything in that building himself.
Oh my gosh.
And he revived all of the craftsmen who were getting out of work. He revived all of them because it was all made locally, everything crafted. It's going to the library and there, you just want to go and live in it. There's Tiffany lamps and dark lighting and every book you can think of. It's just beautifully done.
That is fantastic. Yeah, I saw we had a movie watch on my channel called it was oh my gosh, it's a Star Wars fan film called Fanboys.
Yeah,
Fanboys.
My friend made it, directed it.
Oh, are you kidding?
Carl Newman, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's such a fantastic movie. And did they actually get on
Yes
the ranch to
yeah,
film
George read the script and he allowed them to go and shoot there. See, that's again, it's George is very generous like that. And he, Kyle is a huge Star Wars fan, huge. And he realized it was not derogatory. It was all in good faith. And so, yeah, they went and shot on the ranch. Nobody else had done that.
That's too funny. And they even got William Shatner on there. I was like,
yeah.
So funny.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
They're talking about doing a sequel now.
Oh, they should. They really should.
Yeah.
It's kind of the movie that it kind of gets you in the feels at the very end, but
yeah,
wonderful movie.
Yeah.
Well, my friend Scott has another question. He says, with the digital being the new frontier for movies, are we losing the art of movie posters?
Well, for sure. This poster behind me, it's a bit dark, but this one, the Black Angel poster, this one, if you can see it, it's a bit dark.
Yeah.
So that was hand painted as a gift by Mark Ratz.
Oh my gosh.
When I did the re-release of Black Angel, and he was such a fan and everything, and he painted it for me. And Mark Ratz has hand paints all of the Star Wars stuff that he does, Indiana Jones, all of those, and he's continuing that kind of legacy of it, really the kind of poster. And my favorite poster, and the one that George has got, is this one, which looks like an old Western with peeling I don't know if you can see it. It's not very bright here.
Is it the Star Wars poster?
Yeah, the Star Wars poster, which is the old Western one, where it looks like it's peeling off the walls. That was hand painted.
Oh my gosh.
So I think that's going to continue because Mark is still doing Indiana Jones posters and things. So, and I think they realize that. And it's like it's the genius behind that does it. So there are going to be some fantastic artists working in digital for sure. But even ILM still use models. Avatar, despite all the CGI work, still uses models in certain places and everything. And I think there's something organic. There's something that connects you to that screen when it's like that, And it's nowadays the toy box is open. I say you can do anything digitally, and I mean they're now creating actors, everything. It's past that moment now where it's all possible. But when you look at these early films made with no money, like RoboCop and Terminator, the originals, they were all made like for $1 million, and they're amazing. And
Oh my gosh,
I'm
yeah.
just praying all of that carries on. And I think it will at the end of the day. We'll see. You know, the big superhero movies are running out of steam a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked them, but it just seems like they've had so many that it's kind of muddied the waters.
Yeah, that's what happens. And plus, you know, with models and when you're doing stuff, I mean, everything in the first Star Wars you think was real.
Mm-hmm. You do. Very much so.
Yeah. So, and we know that men don't fly about and do stuff. So those things it's already you're one step away, and they're fantastic. No one does it better than Hollywood. These huge blockbusters and with the sound and everything, they're amazing. But there is something to be told in this original storytelling, and the actors. You just can't replace an actor who's on his game, who is very good, and what comes out is a history of life in their performances. I don't think that'll ever get replaced, honestly.
Yeah. No, never. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I had a question. I watched Black Angel and I thought it was fantastic. I thought the scenery in your movie was outstanding. It was a dark movie, and I was like, wow, for a short movie, it got dark. But the question I had was, the maiden, was she related to you?
Yeah,
Her
she
last
was.
name?
Yeah, no, she was my wife, so I couldn't afford any actors.
Oh my gosh! Because I looked her up on IMDb and it said the maiden and it had her name, but it said
Yeah,
nothing else. And I
yeah,
was like, oh, I wonder if she's related to Mr. Christian. So,
yeah. No, we were married, and she loved movies. French. She's French, so she loved
oh,
French
okay.
movies and that type of movies, and she had that mystical kind of quality in the accent. So yeah, because I had no money, I had a grant from the British government to make it, and nobody had ever shot Scotland ever. And I was following what Kurosawa did. He always used Mount Fuji regions as part of his drama, and I thought, wow, I can use Scotland because it's mystical areas where I was filming, Glencoe and these legendary places that I'd never seen on film before. So I was able to go with short ends. They gave me bits of film left over on Empire Strikes Back. And I had a crew of 9, that's all. And
Wow.
2 horses who took all of my money because I had to have professional horses. And Tony Noble, who played the lead, he was an actor. And the old man, he was one of the actors who was always in Monty Python films. So I knew him from that.
Oh, he looked
yeah,
familiar? Is that who that was?
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
He's in every Monty Python film, and he's always said to me, "Thank goodness you're not dropping custard on me or doing something horrible," because that's all they ever do in Python films, is dump me in terrible things. But yeah, so that's in the end, that's how I had to do it.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing now, finally, after all these years, I'm in deep preparation for a feature based on it. The problem was that where I made it, the pilot for Game of Thrones was done in Scotland. No one knows this.
Oh.
And they followed my kind of look and locations. And then Ireland said, come here, we'll give you all the stages and tax credits. And so they moved there. But they own that look now. I mean, I would just look like I was copying them. So I decided I would go back to the Star Wars days and make it more like an old ancient Western, which I hadn't seen anyone do before. And so mine's now set in the desert regions of Morocco and their ancient buildings.
Oh, okay.
I'm cast, everything is done. We're just waiting on the final finance now.
Gotcha. Because in the Black Angel, he's coming back from the Crusades, right?
Yeah, so I can't mention that anymore.
Or you could say he's still in the Crusades. He
No,
hasn't
you
gone home
can't.
yet.
No, you can't mention the word Crusades.
Oh, you can't?
No, that's out of no. I would be slaughtered.
Oh, okay.
So no, mine is just they're warriors, their fights and everything. Yeah, that was in a day when it was okay to mention things like that, but now it's like it's gone out of what we're allowed to kind of talk about.
It's a taboo word, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's sensitive with the Middle East and all of that.
So one of my questions my daughter had also was, in Star Wars, who is your favorite actor or actress?
That's difficult because you don't like to, but I have to say that Harrison was such a help to me, because I would have props that didn't work and he'd say, "Don't worry, Roger, I'll make it work for you," and everything. And then we early on found out he didn't want to be mixing with the producers or anybody, so we put him building sets in the carpenter's shop. Because we found out he was a carpenter.
That's what I heard.
I could find him down there building sets, and you could tell that he was going to be a huge star. I became very great friends with Mark Hamill and still am. We still see each other whenever we can.
That's fantastic.
I had huge respect for Alec Guinness, as did all the other actors. And he brought such a gravitas to this. Alec Guinness can speak telephone directory, and it sounds like so deep. And he was a huge help to everybody, and always on time, knew his lines, helped the other actors all the way through. But Harrison always stands out as a kind of memory of how much he helped me get through stuff.
Well, I heard a story that one time they made a change to the Millennium Falcon. He got upset and took a saw. Was going to take a saw.
Yeah, that's true. That story. Yeah, that wasn't ours. That was somewhere else on one of the other movies. They did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Wow. I got upset. They didn't respect some of the stuff after we did, like my lightsaber. I don't know why. The set decorator, who I knew very well, and he's not somebody who should be doing science fiction movies. He's fantastic at period films. Even my lightsaber, I stuck the handle, the T-strips. He put rivets in it. Well, that to me immediately made it a handmade thing. This is a mystical object of the Jedi's, and I'm still upset about that, because it went right the way through then to the end, to Rey. But God bless Dave Filoni. And in Obi-Wan Kenobi, in the series, when he digs up the lightsaber, he used my original. With no
that is fantastic. I had no clue.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So do you have the original lightsaber?
We had so many handles. There's a lot of controversy goes on because everyone says, "Oh, there's only one." There wasn't. And in my documentary, I interview David French, where I found the Graflex handles, and the first box I took out, there were 3 in there, and I took those, and I had to make 3 of them because I made the one that had the wooden dowel in it and a spare one. And I have the original Graflex handle, which we bought from David 33 handles. They all went into the thing. So I've got one of those, and I have exact original of mine that I made.
Oh my gosh, that is so wonderful. And the dowel you had, it spun, didn't it?
Yeah. See, I used to open my mouth with stories, and then I get into trouble. We had our meetings, and no one knew how to do it. So I said, I was doing I was doing art installations and we were using front projection paint. And I said, if we got a wooden dowel and stuck it in the end of my handle, painted it with light front projection paint, I think it would get a glow. The DP said, that won't work. Nope, don't do that.
Oh, man.
George overrode him and said, do it. The special effects guy had his contribution was he set it slightly off center, so it actually vibrated as it turned, and it picked up light on the set. And it helped them because in those days you rotoscope. They hand painted every frame, so they had to put in the light blade, but there was something there. It also, we had made a decision that the blades shouldn't go through each other. They should be like real sword fights. They couldn't cut through. So when the only sword fight, is Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader, so they could clash against the sticks to give them a stop point. They broke so many. We were constantly replacing sticks when they were fighting, the two of them. But
I never knew that it was a wooden dowel. I always thought it was either some kind of glass or some kind of plastic, because when Obi-Wan puts his lightsaber down, like facing the camera, it looks like a round plastic dowel that's in there. Yeah, but it was wooden.
It was an old wooden, like a very thin wooden dowel.
Oh, wow.
2 or 3 feet long.
That's great.
You can actually see them. There are some set photographs that exist. I've got one somewhere in my archives with Mark Hamill holding it with that wooden dowel when Obi-Wan Kenobi, and when he presents it to him as his father's lightsaber. There is a shot of it with that dowel in it.
Okay. Scott had one more question. He said, what's your favorite trophy from Star Wars that you might have get? Was it the graphite handle, or did you take anything else from this set?
No, because in those days, everything was junked. I mean, there was no recognition. And I had to leave in the last week, and I went on to the final remake of Beau Geste with Marty Feldman in Spain, and I had to fly straight there. So I literally packed up my bags, stuck the car in the parking lot at the studio, and went and got a flight to Spain. So I would have taken other things. Yeah, my favorite trophy is the lightsaber anyway. I mean, that would be, and I have got the triangular original badge that they had that was stuck on everything on Star Wars. I've got a few of those.
Oh, nice.
And I've also got when we went for the Academy Awards, we had a little kind of party, a drinks party beforehand in a Hollywood restaurant, and Gary Kurtz had gave us these plexiglass signs with Star Wars written on it and Empire. They wrapped it up in a cutting copy from George's editing room of strips of actual film that George was cutting the first Star Wars with. Everybody left. I went and grabbed them all. I said, no, these are, look, I can see there's the chess game on there. And here's Luke doing this and everything. So I've got about 12 strips of that. And that's, to me, is so precious, because that's actually the cutting copy that was used to make Star Wars with in the edit rooms.
That's history right there.
Yeah, I know.
Wow. You've lived a life. I mean, that's crazy.
Yep. Yeah.
So on Star Wars, you were a set director, correct?
Yeah, set decorator is what my title was. And then George hired me to be second unit director on Return of the Jedi. So they're so big, these films, you have another director working alongside, and George was doing that. Then he realized he had to spend more time with Richard Marquand because he wanted Jedi to be done exactly as he wanted it. So they called me and said, would I come and take over? So I did. I went up and shot. So I got to shoot, and you will love this because of your title of your show. I got to shoot Harrison as Han Solo coming out of the carbon. They couldn't schedule him in, and they said, so I knew Harrison, so I had to shoot actually when he falls out, wakes.
That is an iconic
Yeah,
scene. That's so iconic. That's fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'm really geeking right now, so sorry.
And then when George did the Phantom Menace, a huge film, they'd only allowed 12 weeks of shooting because he's not so keen on shooting. And they asked me if I would go. And so we had two units. They were the two units who made Indiana Jones the TV series. They leapfrogged 1 week to the other. And my unit, and I shot, I guess a third of the movie. And in fact, George left. He had to get the special effects going, and I shot the last, I don't know, quite a few days of the movie of Phantom Menace.
Oh
I
my
got to
gosh.
shoot again. I told the crew, listen, what we're shooting today, you should memorize this forever. I got to shoot the scene where C-3PO, who's naked, meets R2-D2 for the first time, and he's beeping and saying, "What do you mean naked?" I got to shoot all of that stuff. I shot a lot of the R2-D2 stuff. I shot a lot of the fights with Darth Maul because they were second unit doing the shoots of that with Ewan. I got to shoot Liam Neeson riding Banthas. And they're kind of so much really legendary stuff that you just get on with it. It's just a job, and I had to do what George wanted. I couldn't do my own kind of version of it. I'd worked out with him how I would do exactly in what he would approve as a second director and everything. I shot a lot of the pod race. Amazing. It was just fantastic being back in this world,
It was fantastic. Yeah, I remember when it came out in '99, I believe.
Yeah.
And they were just fanboys. I mean, they were trying to see the movie before it came out, and just lines of people wanting to see this movie. So
yeah, and it's. I know people. I shot a lot of Jar Jar Binks, and I know people revolted. But if you ask any kid at the time, who's your favorite Star Wars character, it was Jar Jar Binks, because George makes every movie for a 9-year-old. That's his target audience, and he's told me many times, it's not my fault. Adults like them as well, which is true of Star Wars.
Well, I heard that he and Gary Kurtz had a falling out after Empire, and
yes.
The reason is because George was making it more for kids, and Gary wanted it more for serious.
Yeah,
and so they didn't ever do any more work.
No, and it was a lot over budget and a lot of other things that, George puts up the money for each film himself. There's no Hollywood studio; it's all his own money. So anything that's over budget is a serious impact, and it's a shame because they were great together. I was still friends with Gary right up until the end. But yeah, it went a different way. And if you look at Return of the Jedi, because I shot a lot of Ewoks, I had 10 days of shooting Ewoks in that film. That's George, he loves that stuff. And every time I kept saying, can I please go and shoot some switches or something other than Ewoks? And he said, no, it's great what you're doing. Why don't you have a party and do this and do dancing? I was bossing Warwick Davis around all the time as Ewok, telling him to do somersaults and dancing. It was funny.
That's too funny. That is funny because he's only 13 at the time, wasn't he?
Yeah. I reminded him later on when I met him. I said, "You won't remember, but I was the one bossing you around on that."
Oh man, that is too funny. Scott was wondering, did you do any shooting that ended up in any of the Star Wars games?
No, not that I know of. We were on Phantom Menace. We were pushing the digital cameras with George because everyone was against it, and there was shooting going on with the digital cameras, the Sony cameras. Whether some of that ended up, I don't know. It's not something that I was party to. It may have done.
Okay.
That they're very close symbiosis between everything that goes on, and the Star Wars games are just some of the best.
Yeah, and they're so realistic. I mean, you could take
Yeah,
all the cut scenes and
yeah,
make it its own movie,
yeah,
basically.
exactly.
Um, I had a, you know, you worked on Alien and you got an Oscar nomination, which is
Yes,
crazy. I mean, and you won an Oscar on Star Wars, but you also won an Oscar in 1981 for your, I'm trying to find it.
Dollar Bottom, the second short film.
Yeah, The Dollar Bottom. So you've won 2 Oscars. What was going through your mind when they announced that you'd won the Oscars?
We were we didn't think, even in those first time going there, that we ever had a chance. This was a science fiction film, and nobody kind of cared of everything, even though its success had started by then. But we had no inkling that that was going to happen. We'd been out having lunch and we'd had a few drinks and stuff, and we were just kind of there as spectators, honestly. And the whole world kind of stops when you hear your name read out. You know, it's true. John Barry was so gracious, because he said, you know, every frame of this film belongs to one man, and that's George Lucas, which is true. George took such a kind of control, and everything we did was with George, everything. And John Barry, he died on Empire Strikes Back. He got meningitis and it killed him very fast. And he's a legendary, one of the most, he designed Clockwork Orange for Kubrick. Just a young genius,
Oh my
absolute
gosh.
genius. And when I was directing Second Unit on Phantom Menace, one day, George and I were walking across the empty stage at Leavesden, and he stopped and he looked at me and he said, you know, I really miss John Barry. He was such a huge help to George on the first Star Wars. You know, it was John who suggested Tunisia, that we go there and he could create Tatooine there, and how inexpensive it was. No one had really shot like that there, but he designed the Little Prince for Stanley Donen, and he knew the areas, and everything on Star Wars that John was able to. Even Ralph McQuarrie had never done matte paintings. George went up there and showed him how that we could build half of the Millennium Falcon and do a matte painting, which had never been done before. The funny story about that, Ralph McQuarrie, the first one he ever did, so he realized then matte paintings were done on glass, and he didn't have any glass. So he took off his shower door, painted it on that, and Paul Bateman, who's my friend, who's in the documentary, who's a science fiction artist, like revered and became huge friends with Ralph. And he said, worse than that, he decided he had to drive it up to the Specs Boys. He stuck it on top of his old car with a blanket round it and drove.
Oh no.
it. Yeah. This is how Star Wars was made.
Oh my gosh. Those are the best stories ever. Oh my gosh. One question I've had is, well, I've had a whole bunch of questions, but
Yes.
One I was wondering about, ever since Star Wars came out in 1978 or 77, people have always said George Lucas was very unsatisfied because he didn't have the advanced technology to create it like he wanted to. With you and your crew building the sets and stuff like you did, are you okay with him changing the movie, or do you feel like maybe he took some away from what y'all were doing by adding, additional things?
George has always been very clear about that it wasn't the movie he wanted to make. And there were a few things. I mean, Jabba the Hutt is an actor we knew on the set. I think he's better as this Jabba who we know him now. I think that's an improvement. It makes it more Star Warsy.
Yes.
And the other things he's carefully done. No, my only wish is that they would put out the original, which some people have got on VHS, that you could always see the original. But as George says, that's not what I wanted. I just couldn't do it. We didn't have the technology or the time to get it to be what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, it's his movie, and I guess it's his right to do that. I don't think anything's done any harm that we would have done, and we probably would have done it that way if we could have done.
Okay.
I think, I discussed the shooting of Greedo, and I understand George, because the film was for 9 years old, and then he thought, oh, if he's looked at as a cold killer, that wouldn't be right. But I've always argued that he's a Western gunslinger, and he was being threatened by Greedo, and it was done in such a fun way, that shooting him through the table and everything, that in fact it's okay that he shot first. George is kind of compromised now that they shoot at the same time with the sound.
That's too funny.
Things like that, which are funny, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Would you ever consider I was wondering, did they ever ask you to come back, since you did almost win an Oscar for Alien? Did they ever ask you to come back on any other Alien movies?
No, because I was directing by then. I'd been determined to turn to a director, and having done Star Wars, I'd done Alien, Life of Brian. I thought, you know what, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. Ridley did. He asked me to design Legend for him, that amazing.
The Tom Cruise movie?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Stunning. It's just stunning, that movie. When you look at it, it's I still say it's probably the most beautifully photographed movie I've ever seen.
It is very fantastic. I love that movie.
He asked me to design that for him. So, yeah, there was a continuing, but I was directing and trying to make my way by then. And I'd made Black Angel and made The Dollar Bottom, and then I'd got The Sender, which was my first movie with Paramount. So I was asked to design Conan, the John Milius Conan, which I would have loved to have done, because it's another great looking movie.
Mm-hmm.
We put our Spanish art director, who we hired on Alien, onto it, who did it. But and they've been fantastic, the Alien movies, anyway. So
they have.
If I carried on, I probably would have just gone on doing them. Yeah, always, and I never would have minded that. I just had this ambition. I got to make my own movies now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't blame you. You're the one in charge. You get to call the shots.
Yeah.
The last two Alien movies have been really fantastic.
Yeah.
Sort of like the prequels.
Yes.
So I really like those.
Yeah.
So Scott had one more question about how intense was the shot list on Star Wars? Was it storyboarded out shot for shot?
Not really. The very first one, there were a few bits and pieces of Ralph McQuarrie's, but I can't remember it actually being storyboarded. No. Some scenes had to be for the special effects. They were all storyboarded wherever they had to be, because they're shooting model pieces and at the time and everything. But the live action, no. I can't remember ever having a storyboard of how we were going to do it, ever.
Oh, wow.
So
that's very unique, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the way films were made. Nowadays, they're electronically produced in computers before you even start shooting. You've got the whole movie on a computer in front of you, and you're just following what's there. It's all done. Even on Phantom Menace, John Knoll was on the set all the time, and he had I shot the first thing I did was the in the Senate, where they're floating around on those discs.
Oh yes, you did those?
Yeah, and I had a full visualization of exactly what lens, everything. It was all marked out. We'll use an 85mm lens here, and this shot is from this angle, and you come up here. And I could go with John Knoll and look and say, what about if we come up here? And then that would be cut in, and then that was how we shot it. So it had progressed a long way. No, we were struggling to get through. You know, we had a storm on the fourth day on Star Wars that destroyed the sets, and struggling with robots that never worked. The special effects didn't work. We actually, John Barry called Les Dilly and I into his office before we went to Tunisia, because Les and I were delegated to go on the set for the whole shoot in Tunisia. And he called us in the office and he said, listen, I don't trust John Steers. I don't trust that this remote control is going to work down in the desert. You're going to be miles from anywhere. Build a lightweight one, match it perfectly to R2-D2 that we can pull along on fishing wire. And the first shot on Star Wars, that was where they were buying the robots, Uncle Owen.
Uh-huh.
It fell over, it crashed, it all went wrong. John Steers blamed it on taxis. There's no taxis. There were donkeys and camels for like 5 miles away.
Oh my gosh.
And that was the first thing Gary Kurtz said. Have you got the monofilament one? He's the only one who knew. We hadn't told anybody. And then Les was confused by monofilament. And I said, no, I think he means the fishing wire. And we got ours out and we laid down board in the sand and covered the edge with sand. And we pulled R2-D2 on most of the scenes with fishing wire, where he's moving on 3 legs on the 3-wheeled version. We were just struggling to get through every day. I just struggling to even, and George always says he got about 25% of what he actually wanted.
Well, it's still a masterpiece, though.
It is, and it just shows you, you know, it's like, well, it's the same as the spaghetti westerns, you know. Yeah. I loved Sergio Leone's westerns. I loved them, and they're made for $1 million in Spain. They're more accurate westerns than huge Glenn Ford, you know, masses of money. I think they have more gritty kind of reality to them. So
I told my good friend, we have another channel called The Movie Bros, and he's into horror. I'm into sci-fi and fantasy. And like you, I like King Arthur and you know, stuff like that. But I said, the spaghetti westerns are my favorite.
Yes.
You know, I'm not into huge westerns, but the good, the bad, the ugly for a few dollars more.
Yeah.
I just love those movies. I was like, if you ever wanted to do a live watch, I would totally be there.
They're brilliant.
To watch those.
Yeah, they're brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And Once Upon a Time in America, he finally got a budget to go and make a big version of it. And it's just a masterpiece, I think.
Yes.
In fact, the costumes, we were showing our costume designer on Star Wars, he showed the crew that, George, on Star Wars, he showed them the spaghetti westerns to try to get them to understand what he wanted.
Oh my gosh. Well, you've been here for 1 hour and 15 minutes.
Right.
I don't want to take any more of your time than is necessary, but I could stay here and listen to you for
there's
10 more hours.
I have a lot of stories. I've done so many lectures and things. So
I have really enjoyed having you on this channel and for this interview. And it was, I heard you say something about how you made Obi-Wan's lightsaber.
Yes.
What did you make it? What parts did you make it out of?
There's a grenade, World War II grenade.
Oh my gosh.
There's a piece of a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine.
Oh no.
What I did was collect anything that I thought was interesting. It was never for a specific purpose. Anything. My buyers will bring in junk, you know, scriptlets, big skips of junk. I collected so many interesting bits that I had to move office to another one. It was so full. So I would just go and pick pieces and go, oh, this is great. Or, you know, the binoculars, Luke's binoculars are made out of 3 camera parts that I found and I stuck together with super glue. Everything was done like that. So I never knew the purpose. I didn't go out and say, I need this, I need that. The only one was the lightsaber handle that I had asked David French if there was anything in the camera hire store that I might use. I had to make a science fiction weapon, and he showed me these boxes under a shelf that probably hadn't been looked at for 10 years. And the first one I opened up, there was graphite handles, and I literally had found the Holy Grail. I could have used it just like that. And there's a beauty in an object that's designed purposely for something else. It had a red button. It just looked how I imagined a lightsaber handle. And I stuck 7 of the T-strips that I used on the barrel of the Sterling submachine guns. I had some left over, so I stuck 7 of them round it. And I basically, somebody brought in some old calculators, and I'd taken one to pieces to see what was inside it. And there was a bubble strip that illuminated the numbers, and it fitted in the clip of the Graflex battery handle where it clipped onto the camera, which I thought, I can't leave a clip, that doesn't look right. So it's just slid in and fitted perfectly, and I got it to length, and that's it. There was the lightsaber.
Oh my gosh.
And it's heavy, it was handled, it was beautiful.
I'm just in awe. I mean, you're the original MacGyver, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, this has been, oh, Scott has one question. Last question, and I'll let you go.
Okay.
Is that why C-3PO's leg was silver?
Yeah, that George. See, when you look at C-3PO, he's based on it was made in the 30s, this huge German film, and I'm blanking on the name now, but in there, Maria is a robot they built around an actress who could stand up. And he's based on that. Ralph McQuarrie changed him from female to male, and we put a dent in his head to make him used. And then the other idea was that he would lost a part of him, and so that he'd had it replaced. So it gave them a history, and it gave them a used quality that we'd never seen before. No one had ever dared do that before. So that's why.
Okay. Well, sir, thank you so much for coming
Not at
on
all.
here.
It's nice to be on with you. And, there's a lot of stories. There's many more.
Oh, my gosh. If you ever feel like coming back and talking
anytime.
more Star Wars, I would love
anytime. Yeah, I'm very supportive because he's given the world something to believe in. His kids, now the 4th generation, it's the right message of good transforming the darkness. They're winning their hero's journey. He on purpose created a myth, a new myth for the age. And, where religions aren't connecting so well anymore to the young, he's done it, not as a religion, but the great hero stories, that are all the same, as Joseph Campbell mentored George into how to do it. They're the stories that embed into our subconscious and have us connect to who we are. And Star Wars has done that. And I'm so supportive of it. And, and I hear it all the time. I'm lecturing and doing stuff, and I'm starting a mentoring series now to help filmmakers. And it's partly Star Wars and partly spiritual journey and all of these things that are deeply involved in it. But, just even the fact that a father or a mother is in the cinema with their child, there's a connection. And that's kind of getting rarer. So anything like that promotes us finding out who we are, Star Wars has helped people to do that. It's given something to believe in. The guys who made lightsabers, SX sabers, who are friends of mine now, they sell them. They're here in Toronto, and they make these beautiful sabers. The other day, we were at a Star Wars show, and he asked me to sign an autograph for him because he hadn't got one, and the others had got one. and they gave my son a lightsaber.
Oh my gosh.
And then he brought out a box and said, look, I've got the original based on your original one, and I didn't get it signed. And literally, they're filming him. He was in tears, crying as I signed it for him. So, this is something very rare, and it's and the fandom is such a good cause for everything in the world. So I'm fully supportive. That's why I do all this. So I wrote the book and I've done this documentary, and I'm continuing to do it because I think we need it. The world needs it more than ever now.
Well, I can't wait to read your book. I'm really excited.
Let me know what you think. So
I will.
Okay.
And I can't wait for your documentary to come out also.
When you read the book, you're going to go, I should have asked that. I should have. What about that? Oh, my goodness. So
I will. I'll send you a mad email.
Yeah. and send me a copy of this because we'll blast it out wherever I can. Okay. When you've got it, you'll have a copy, no, for the broadcast?
Yes.
Yeah. Get me a copy if you can, a viewing copy.
Okay. All right. I'm going to end the broadcast and I'll meet you backstage.
Okay.